1 month from today, I'm gonna be in Sydney, Australia at South by Southwest, showcasing the demo of my game, Disinherited. I want to be able to make the best first impression possible, and one of the best ways to do that is through visual appeal. Over the past couple months, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about the general look of the game. Thank you. And for the parts that I've been unhappy with, I've been kind of gradually reworking them over the course of the summer. There are a couple elements still in the game that get a lot of screen time that I wasn't quite happy with. So I took this opportunity to rework them. However, getting some of them to work was a little bit of a brain teaser. I'll tell you why. I'm Dryden Thomas and I'm developing Disinherited. It's a side-scrolling roguelike game where you throw, catch, and parry your way through Death's domain to slay the Grim Reaper and claim eternal life, all to spite your father who cut you out of his will. And before we get into the meat of the video, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's downloaded the demo and played it and left feedback, whether on itch.io or Discord. I'm really enjoying the process of sifting through it all and looking for common themes and trying to make decisions based on that. Which is why this week I worked primarily on cosmetic things nobody asked for. It's for me this time. Okay, let's start with the tile map. It's pretty squarey, but there's a lot of difficulty inherent to fixing that. For one thing, all of the exploration areas are procedurally generated from chunks of tile map. Even many of the decorations spawn in from these tiles that label the dimensions. For another thing, if you change the geometry of the tiles, you'll run into challenges with Samuel's climbing, which is extremely important for navigation. So what do? Well, the first step for me was pulling in a screenshot of the game to my drawing program Procreate. Here, I started painting over what my ideal shapes would be. The first thing I noticed was that not much really happens in these top corner areas, so it's a great place to add an arching shape. Bottom corners should be rounded off with a bit of foliage or a spider web. And in the background, I could add pillars that echoed the arches in the corners, the gravestones, and the skull window things. I could also add a little lip to the edges, and then under spikes where nothing important happens, I could cut the tile map early and curve under for a bit more visual variety. So I took those ideas that I had sketched out, and since I knew the tiles were 256 by 256, I could use a grid to fit them well, and then the tile map art to make sure it was harmonizing color-wise. Several people have asked for foliage, and so I went back and forth on what color to make it, because no normal green plant would probably grow in the Catacombs. So I went with these blues that echoed the gravestone and complement the general orange hue of the area. Then I took all of these assets that I'd made and I laid them out within the hub area. That way I could really see how they interacted with the different geometries that were possible in the tile map. And then I saved them all as prefabs. So now comes the issue of how am I going to spawn these into a procedurally generated scene? Okay, this is the most technical part of the video, but I know you. You're watching game dev videos on YouTube. You're a nerd. You like this. I had a sort of general idea of how I wanted this to happen, and it was inspired by graphics programming, particularly post-processing effects. Or at least my understanding of how this works. When you blur an image, for example, what happens is the program passes over every pixel in the image and uses what's called a kernel, which is a matrix of values that expands beyond that pixel, to decide how much those other pixels should influence the color value of the center pixel. I sort of combined this idea with the idea behind Unity's rule tile system, which has each tile look at its neighbors to decide which picture to show. That way a corner uses the sprite for a corner instead of this or something else. Then I used Odin Inspector for the first time to create a visual tool for myself. Each time I click in one of these squares, it changes one of the values in a two-dimensional array to a different value. 0 means the tile has to be empty, 1 means the tile has to be occupied, 2 means that it can be either. I represented these values with colors because I'm super visual and that makes more sense to me. Then I can use these to create little layouts. Here we have an upper left corner and here's a bottom right corner. And then I can even do a 5x5 double array to look at a bigger group of tiles. Then I had to get this into my level generator as a final pass. Once all of the enemies, relics, and regular decorations have been added, we can do a cover-ups pass. I loop through all the tiles in the map, and if that particular set of 9 or 25 matches with the layout I set up, I grab one of the decorations that belongs in that tile setup and spawn it with the correct rotation. As you can see, this results in a pretty dramatic improvement visually, at least in my opinion. And when I speed tested it, this added almost nothing to the generation time. But I even found out that I could take it further. See, the way that I'd been in placing these decoration tiles was basically algorithmic anyway. If there's this kind of space here, I'm going to put a 1x1 or a 1x2. If there's a big space, I'm going to put a 3x2 or a 3x1. Using the system that I just set up, I could teach the computer to do the work that I was doing manually all summer, because I was just following a set of rules anyway. So I took out the decorations pass, added them all just the way that I was doing the cover-ups, and it pretty much worked the same. There's a little refinement that I have yet to do in this system, but honestly, it's not that far off. Alright, now onto the Reaper's redesign. He's a really important figure in the game. As you traverse the exploration areas, he's constantly on your tail, ready to slash you or drain your light. However, he was also the very first character I ever rigged in my entire life with 2D bone animations. I drew him on day 2 of a certain high-pressure competition, and I haven't been able to get back to rework him since. My complaints are as follows. I don't think the character design here is bad per se, but it could be better. There's a decently threatening use of triangular shape language, but I think the roundness of the hood contributes to a slightly friendlier appearance than I wanted. The small hand is also a bit weird. Initially, I had thought that it would be part of the style of the game, but it looks slightly babyish to me. Also, there's the spine, which dangles out just a little too close to the head. It's missing something. And last, the scythe for an arm creates animation problems. Like, imagine you have to swing a sword, but without bending your elbow. The hood I wanted to elongate. I added a rib cage too, and now the hood and cloak are separated into 5 layers, with more pointy triangle shape language. I also solved the elbowless arm problem by changing the wooden handle of the scythe to a chain. Fun fact, this is what I actually wanted to do originally, but I got scared off at the time by the idea of drawing a chain. This time, the fingers are all separated too. And before anyone mentions it, I know there aren't an anatomically correct number of phalanges, but this is a cartoon, it's stylized. Okay? You're lucky there are 5 digits at all. And then I got to work on the rig itself, and as I've learned from past mistakes, it's better to add in everything you may want and do it right the first time. Each bone in the hand is articulated and very carefully spliced. The link in the chain is separated so it won't distort, and each layer in the cloak can billow and cross each other, so the keyframes can look a lot less janky when you pause. Overall, I think he's looking a lot tougher and scarier. The shape language is sharper, the line work is cleaner, and he looks better when swinging the blade. There's just a lot more detail here too. The form of the scythe is more distinctive, and that shape gets repeated in the robes, the hood, the tips of the fingers, and on the vertebrae and the spinal cord. The chain links and the ribs even taper slightly into triangles pointing up toward the head. The lines of the ribs also get repeated in the folds of the cowl and the hand bones. After a couple hours of rigging and animating, the Reaper is back in the game, and it was a pretty simple replacement. And as a little bonus this week, I redid my most hated animation for Samuel, his jump and fall animation. The old one was done so quickly and it was just 2 frames. Also, it was based off of the original character model rather than the updated turnaround that I did over the summer. And worst of all, jumping is a huge part of this game, so you see it all the time. This new 13-frame jump, hang, and land has a lot more life to it, and I feel a million times more relaxed having finally done it. Plus, it looks kinda awesome when you have the cirrus wings on and you're floating down. So, this was the week. I've also snuck in some other quality of life changes, a little reformatting in the level design, and added some other stuff like an attack buffer, for example. But I'll let you discover those on your own, since they're still a work in progress. If you want to see it all for yourself, there's a new build up on itch.io. Thank you again for any and all feedback and for watching, and a special thank you to our channel members who are supporting me financially while I build this thing. But the biggest thank you goes to our Reaper Council level members, AJ Havoc, Dual NY, Emil Scove, and Ironic You Ask. Thank you so much for all you do to make this possible. See you in the next one!